I'm Jo Wright, and this is the Coaching Culture podcast, where we discuss how to make work better. So welcome to the Coaching Culture podcast, and today I am joined by a truly inspirational guest, somebody who I've known for many, many years and is a regular at the Coaching Culture conference, and somebody who I could listen to for hours and hours and hours on end. And it's the wonderful Jules Darvill, or Julia Darvill. I call you Jules, you're Jules to me. Jules Darvill, who is the MD of Puratos, and every time we have a conversation, you light up my world. My heart is filled. And today, that's why you're a guest on this podcast, because everything you talk about, people just love listening to you, your stories, the depth behind it. And today, that's what you're here for, Jules, to share you. And we're going to talk about a topic that matters so much to you and also out in the world at the moment, which is the subject of value. So, Jules, over to you, and tell us a little bit more about yourself and why we're talking about this topic today.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah, so for context, for those that we've not come across before, it's my absolute pleasure to spend time with a team of about 8 in the UK working for Puratos Global. We're a food innovation company, and food and drink's how we met. And it's an incredibly dynamic place to play, but it's also quite a toxic place to play at times. And at the moment, it's quite challenging. And so I run a business that has 2 manufacturing facilities and 1 innovation centre that's literally across the country. And so we've got quite a diverse spectrum of talent, everything from the R&D super geeks right through to the guys that are on the factory floor, on the front line, working jolly hard for us.
Yeah, brilliant. And Jules, in terms of, you and I have had many conversations about many different topics, and that's why you get your regular slot at the Coaching Culture conference, because you have so much interaction with so many people, but you also get a real sense of what's going on, how people are feeling, what are they thinking, what is the pulse of the organisation. And today we're going to talk about value. What are we going to explore when we talk about value? What are the things that are mattering to you most at the minute with the word value?
I think essentially understanding what value is to people is something that we've stopped doing. So I want to incite change with any conversations we ever have, Jo. And Coaching Culture is very good at putting that platform out for people. I want us as an organisation, and I want us as an industry, and indeed globally, I want nationally for us to think differently about value post-pandemic. And of course, in light of what's going on around us, there's a lot of macro socioeconomic influences that are making us think differently. And I want people to just think about how their processes and how the grotesque mirror that they might not have looked in for a while needs to come to the forefront to enable people to think about value differently.
When you talk about the word value, value pre-pandemic versus value today, what are we talking about with value? Because value could be values, value could be the value I place on things, the value I place on the world around me, my organisation, my team. Value could be so many things to different people. So when we talk about value today, what specifically do you want people to be thinking about?
And I think that's a good question. I think this is about worth. So this isn't about corporate DNA on the wall. This is about the nuanced and highly subjective sense of what somebody thinks somebody is worth, whether that's themselves or it's, a package that they have. Worth for me is something that comes so deeply with a lot of baggage for a lot of people from your education and your experiences. So we're talking about somebody's worth and how that has essentially changed or evolved for many people. And we need to start talking more and understanding people's worth in a different way.
Fabulous. So pre-pandemic, and this is feeling like we're touching on, as we know the phrase has been coined, the great reevaluation, where people are really in the pandemic had that opportunity to just take a breath and think, well, some people didn't get to take a breath in terms of they were running at 100 miles an hour, but some people did actually get the chance to sort of reevaluate what mattered to them most, and what they placed value on now is very different from what it was before. And you and I had a bit of a conversation about that before we actually came on air on the podcast, in terms of whether that's employee experience, time has gone up as much more valuable, time with family. Is that what we're talking about in that kind of worth?
Yeah, for sure. I think the pandemic on a very human level touched us in the sense that it was about our fallibility. So if you look at our very basic human need to understand purpose, what drives us, the pandemic was something that threatened life and sadly cost a number of people their lives. And it's the first time as a human race, it's certainly in my lifetime, we've witnessed something as profound as that. If I asked you a question, Jo, how much money would I give, could I give you for your house? Whatever the value of the house is, you'd say, let's make a fair trade on that. Here's the amount of money. And you'd assess that value with market context. And you'd look at similar size houses, all that kind of stuff. If I asked you now, could I have your body? You'd say, well, it's worth this. And that's a very subjective thing as to how much would I have to say just to be able to give me your lungs and stop breathing. It's a very, very important thing to place value on life. And the pandemic was the first time we started to think about something so deep and so profound. And that's, of course, translated itself in some of the conversations we're all having now about everything from inflation, cost of living, fuel crisis, whether you get healthcare in your benefit package, and all these kind of things in the HR domain. They're causing a great deal of conjecture and debate.
And what sort of debate are they creating then? So, what conversations are you hearing in your organisation or amongst, your peers in other organisations? Because you are right, you see it all the time in the news. And we're discussing it. In fact, our next issue of the magazine's got things about the great revaluation. It's also got about financial well-being, because that is definitely a concern for many organisations today, for how their employees are feeling because of all the, everything we're talking about, the cost of living and fuel and all of that. How can coaching conversations help this sort of, things that are going on in employees' minds? What conversations are you hearing, Jules?
I think in the industry as a whole, and then I'll come on to specifically my organisation, in the industry, we're affected by general cost increase, whether that's supply chain issues or that's war related or logistics or whatever it is. And that's going to then mean that everyone expects more. And rightly or wrongly is not the debate here. It's more about whether somebody's shifted the goalpost. And organisations that measure their profit, whether it's EBITDA or it's all about chasing revenue, are expecting different value chains. In specifics to the organisation I have the pleasure of working with, Puratos is a very diverse, as I mentioned before, spectrum of people and incomes. And I'm very respectful of that. We've never been so aware of the cost of living as we have when, inflation is at 10% or 9.1% this morning. Because you've got people on frontline workers in our operations doing some pretty tough jobs. And the quality of their lives needs to be improved and their working conditions need to be improved, let alone just their base salary, to make sure that they can continue to grow their families. I've never had so many live conversations about value. And this is where I say it's a debate. It's not necessarily about price. So if that was just about base salary, for example, there is so much more that an organisation can give, whether it's time, as you mentioned, as a currency, and flexibility, whether it's training and investment and development. And I think we've lost sight of some of these really valuable discussions on the spectrum of value. The spectrum of value is so much more than just price. And of course, from our commercial discussions in our previous lives, both you and I have been part of those discussions. Creating value in something is absolutely an employer's job, and helping people to understand what one person values versus the other is quite unique and nuanced. And there are some people in my team that are completely and utterly turned on by just one element of a package. And there are others that say, I need flexibility. I'm a single working father. I need flexibility. And this flexibility is worth 10 times whatever the salary you may offer me. I need that time with my son. So I think this is what pandemic's taught us, is we're starting to see a divergence, should I say, in the spectrum of value.
And in terms of then how that conversation permeates through the organisation, because this sounds like either a great practical conversation at a board table, or a philosophical conversation at the pub. actually, how does this quality of thinking and conversation permeate throughout the organization? Because obviously here at Coaching Culture, we're all about how do we help leaders and managers have those better quality conversations that matter to their teams. Fundamentally, that's what we're about. How are those conversations permeating through the organization? What's happening?
I think that's a great question, because I think most people default at the moment in response to these types of movements in value and the demand on things like strikes and people price, salary discussions alone. I think a lot of people default to putting processes in that allow for people to just have this compartmentalization, and it dehumanizes the discussion. I don't, as an employee, want to be treated the same because I'm not the same as the colleague next. And I understand that we need in HR arenas to operate with a level of objectivity, and you need context. But coaching is absolutely the lifeblood of understanding somebody's value. And by that, I mean, it creates intimacy, it creates trust. And whilst we all know that, I haven't worked around in the industry and organisation certainly in the last year, that I have been suitably impressed with that is setting the standard or the benchmark on coaching. We all have a lot of work. And this is about investing time and physically, commercially investing in learning and development platforms. You get a lot of people who are chasing recovery post-pandemic, and how a business measures their profit is entirely up to them. But it's a short game if it's about chasing profit and recovery. The long game, the more sustainable game, will be about building a coaching culture that allows the communication and the social contracts to be built between people, where you understand what someone's value is. And that's essentially coaching. What is your motivation to work? How can we guide you with that? And how is that different from person A to person B?
How can we help? How can I help you get the best out of you to make you have the best experience at work, which then obviously feeds your life, your family, your lifestyle, all of the above. Hey, you know me, you're preaching to the converted here, and hopefully our listeners as well, because that's why they've listened into a Coaching Culture podcast. But you're so right. This is about human to human conversations. It's not about the dehumanization. And I totally buy into the fact that we need systems, processes. We absolutely do. But actually at the heart, we need conversation and understanding and empathy.
I'll give you an example. I spent some time on site in my factory in the north a couple of weeks ago, and I had a conversation. I was doing my what I would call intimacy chats. I'm going to talk to anybody at any level to understand and ask that very question: how can I help you be better at something, or how can we enable you in some way, or what's causing you pain is always a great question. That kind of coaching time to really invest in somebody pays dividends when two days later I get an email from one of the gentlemen who had actually asked to borrow. He doesn't have access to email in the role he is, has asked to borrow some time to email me to say, thank you for asking me. That's worth more. And this comes back to worth and value. That's worth more that you just took time to ask me. I appreciate these things will not be fixed overnight, but thank you for asking me. That you asked me means you've got me for life. Now, that was so powerful, Jo, honestly, because that time that you've given, you think, quite honestly, at the moment, we're all about recovery. We're all about go, go, go. Everybody I hear is talking about hybrid working response times and how we're expected to drive here and be online there. And there's just more and more and more, and we're becoming very greedy very quickly. We've soon forgotten how human we were during the pandemic. But these coaching moments have to happen. Every single leader I work with, at the moment in our organisation, there's 70 subsidiaries across the group, and there's 9,500 employees. I want to push this agenda so heavily that we make time for each other.
I mean, for me today, I have to say I'm having the most amazing day from speaking to you, speaking to also Michelle Reed, who you've met before, People Director of Institute of Occupational Medicine. We had a 2-hour conversation this morning. And with you, like yourself, Jules, I could just do this like forever, this conversation. And it was like, oh, we need to cut this now. 2 hours is more than enough. But she also talked about listening with intent and going around the organisation and just asking so many different people, different departments, different levels, you name it, everybody, and ask the question, back to your point, what's causing you pain? What's keeping you awake at night? How can we help? And then going back with, you said this and we've now done this. So actually we're listening with intent. We're not just asking for the sake of it. We're listening with intent. And I just love that. And it's exactly and I love what you just said, intimacy chats. This is it. And these don't take time. These don't take a lot of time. This is small things that have a hugely disproportionate impact on the feeling in an organisation. And the fact you've now got somebody for life.
And
You've
we're
got me now.
rewiring. That's which is amazing.
Totally.
And I believe him as well. I believe that, and that we've built trust with each other. He now knows a little bit about me because I referenced at the time a silly episode with, getting my child dressed in the morning, and we've bonded on certain things that made us both smile. I think these are the things that we've post-pandemic, we have a little challenge as we're rewiring how to build chemistry with each other. As a human, as a human, hybrid is a funny way of working. And there are some people who are totally fueled, and you've talked about this on a number of your podcasts in the past. It's a very, again, subjective and nuanced thing. It's a very personal thing as to how you build intimacy with each other. And some people don't want to build, they have that professional wall. But actually, I think you'll be surprised. We're doing it even in outside of work, in social circumstances. We're finding social awkwardness moments at the moment. And that's because we have to rewire ourselves and retrain. And that's what I'm seeking to talk about, is if we talk about value, I would like anybody to just come off any of discussions like this that we're having and just invite the topic or the debate around value just to understand more. We should be a learning organisation. If anybody wants to evolve, we're in innovation. We should be open-minded as an organisation. And I think we're making small inroads now into rewiring ourselves and ask those things.
So what
and make
questions would you recommend people? So if somebody's listening to this now and you thought, right, okay, let's open up this conversation. Let's just give a few little sprinkles of ideas of practical questions you would say, just go out there and explore this and see what comes back. And you just may be surprised by the conversations you end up having. What questions would you open up with about value that help people feel confident and comfortable to share their innermost thoughts and feelings?
I think it starts with a slightly subjective kind of opener or icebreaker. We're very nervous often in coaching discussions to start with words like feeling. So asking somebody how they feel to start with as an icebreaker can be an incredible trust builder. And it's how I always start. How are you feeling? How are you today? I'm genuinely interested. That's that kind of opening social contract. Then getting into what's causing you pain is too fast to get to that. Between that, I think there's that building of a little bit of intimacy, which is being transparent. We're talking about value as an organisation right now. Tell me, what do you feel about value, and how valued do you feel? I think it's always about the open questions. I mean, that kind of goes without saying, and I don't want to teach any of your lovely listeners to teach them to suck eggs, but I really don't think we ask open questions anymore, because the world of Zoom and the world of 2D, and we're very time poor, has prevented that intimacy. Giving people time and space to pause for their answers is really critical. We're talking about value right now. What does that mean to you? Okay, cool. And so where could we improve upon something? What are you thinking about? How do you feel about that? Because whilst we're gathering essentially then qualitative, subjective data, you're building trust with someone who wants to share their opinion. We all want to be asked.
It's again really, this is so linking to the conversation. Again, I had just this morning so many rich conversations it's not even lunchtime about value. So the conversation was about, how employees need to feel valued. They need to be able to see and feel the value they bring, but also they need to see and feel the value the organisation is bringing to them. So we kind of talked about an image of a sort of 3 circles and where they interlock in the middle with the sweet spot of value and the three and the value. It was really interesting because I don't know, maybe whether it's because of our podcast today, Jules, but suddenly the word value for me is appearing everywhere. It's like the red Ferrari when I think of them, and I see them now and again. So, it's that value is so important. And I think the more and more organisations that are acknowledging that, because like you said, it's different for different people. And let's not assume. You say something, you've said it before.
It is.
One size doesn't fit one size doesn't fit everyone or doesn't fit all. It fits one.
Yep. Yep. Yes, it does. Absolutely. And I think the other thing is, it's not just about the organisations. We've talked a lot about what do we have to do as employers, but as employees, the call to action here would be, if you're not feeling valued, explore and sit with yourself as to why that might be before you then brave the discussion to engage with the right person to say, can we talk about value? And actually, that's something that we've had I'll be very honest with you. The conversation started in our organisation because someone brought that to my attention. It wasn't even in my psyche, which is dreadful because we're so addicted to recovery and go, and delivering on the plan and stick to the strategy, flawless execution, all those wonderful buzz terms. But then, hold on a minute, have we thought about the people? And someone came to me and said, I'm struggling right now with value. Let's talk about it. Great opener. Cool. Okay, let's unpick that together. So if you're an employee listening to this, as well as, of course, from an organisation standpoint, and you're thinking, there's something suboptimal about this right now.
Yes.
You're doing yourself and the organisation a disservice by not talking about it.
And not flagging it, but maybe they don't feel psychologically safe enough to do that. So it's how do you create that right environment for people to go, actually, they've done that with you. They feel safe enough to put their hand up and go, I need to talk about this. Brilliant. And that is the start of a great change, potentially something, special for that employee, and do that on a large scale. What a difference you've got in a culture.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right, Jo. Not everybody feels like that. And I would be remiss to think that everybody is ready to just go gung-ho and approach leadership candidates and start, essentially whinging about something. I don't think it's like that in our organisation, and I feel very privileged to operate here. But I fully appreciate there are other cultures where it's almost hierarchically not sensible to do some things. And if you don't feel safe like that, finding the right forums or challenging perhaps the how or the vehicle for that might not be in existence might be the way of approaching it. So if you're someone who's feeling not perfectly valued, but you do believe that there are a few others of your colleague base that are like that, then perhaps positioning what you think rather than the problem, here's a solution. Can we start some topics of discussion? Here's one as a topic. Let's throw in value to start with. And there's a mechanic missing, whether it's an employee forum or whatever it is. But the whole thing that funds all of that is coaching. It's feeling safe to develop, and skills as well. Honestly, Jo, the number of people who we still don't believe have got the right skill set to be able to coach confidently, and then that it becomes an unfortunate self-fulfilling prophecy that then the great conversations don't get had because people don't feel confident probing in the right way. So it's building those skill sets in your organisation as well on how to really quality coach. We have to invest now. There's so many people that are cutting L&D budgets left, right and centre.
No.
This is not how
and the best organisations know
future.
that, to be fair, Jules, that is not what you do at a time when we need to dig even deeper than normal. And like you said, this is about the sustainability for the future. And it breaks my heart cutting L&D budgets. And we often talk about, coaching needs to have its own line on the organisational P&L. This is about, call it coaching, call it great conversations, because that's fundamentally what it is, because we're having them all the time. Conversations happening. How do we make them a bit better? Let's just go for a bit for now. Let's go a bit better. And then let's keep going. And it is back. You just said before, we've lost the art of the open question. Let's go back there then. Let's start there and build. Obviously that this is everything that we preach here on my little coaching culture soapbox, but you're so right. And it's fabulous to hear, because I know you're very much an advocate of how to build a coaching culture and just to keep role modeling those questions and the conversations in the right way. So in terms of value, what other things would you want people to know that should unlock either the concept of the conversation of value or actually making a difference with value? So actually, where should we go with it for now? Where are the things that what are the steps we need to take to ensure we're getting the most out of the conversation linked to value?
I think it starts with that kind of audit or observation mode. Everyone has to look in the mirror to understand, have I got the right systems in place to allow for people to gather qualitative data on their value. I mean, when we talk about things like motivation to work models, have I got enough tools around me just to even assess the current status quo? And now more than ever is the time for anybody to do that. That is above and beyond the standard annual employee opinion survey. Go deep on value. It's a topic that is macro, national, it's big. So I would say start with an audit. I think the next step is then identifying or assessing how competent parts of the organisation, function by function, are on having those dialogues, and are you getting really good quality data before you get in to start planning solutions for it. It might be that there's an inherent need for mental health first aid training, or it might be that the training the skills, a classic example in my organisation would be sales. The way we sell is different now than we did 5 years ago. It's more consultative, and you have to be a damn sight more resilient in your key account management structure, because when it's not going away that Brexit has been a pain in everyone's bottom, or that there's all sorts of complexities around full service package management. These are things that, so before you get into solution mode on how you can build and develop people, it's understanding what they really want and what motivates them. And I would say we've got to that place now where we're clear on having identified in diagnosis mode. We're now forming platforms or pockets that are just revising our strategy on people. We're kind of tightening some things, or we're accelerating some things. We haven't ripped up and started again. And I imagine many of your listeners won't do the same either. But it's just about reevaluating, reassessing post-pandemic. Where are we at with these things? A grotesque mirror for some, and was for us. And how do we start those chats again? And for me, the number one on value creation has been being clear and transparent with everybody about their worth by giving them development. So we're in an innovation business, as I keep saying. People want to grow. There is an inherent need to evolve in scientific behaviours and operational parts of our business. People really want to feel like they have a future here because there's been so much uncertainty. So other than moving salary indexes for this and this, there are things you can put out that are short-term fires or short-term wins, and then there are things that are deep and meaningful. The short-term win for us is making sure people are paid what is the fair value. And by that I mean, if the cost of living has increased by 9.1%, we need to ask ourselves, are we really asking employees to work for less? If you're not happy, there's a difference between inflation and merit, and that's something many businesses fail to differentiate. Merit is where you recognise somebody is wholly worth advancing, or that they've delivered, a sensational output. That's different than the basic cost to live has gone up. And if people aren't implementing increases and then passing them on, the challenge with that you've got is you're asking somebody to work for you to do the same job for less. And if you're fine with that as an organisation, that's also fine. I fully appreciate that might mean that you can invest in other things for people. But I would just be, again, grotesque mirror is something that we've had to look at. There are people who are struggling to feed their families on the very basics at this moment in time. And we're going into winter. Who knows what the next variant may or may not be. We are asking ourselves, I think we should all be asking ourselves, is certainly in an industry like food, are we really giving people fair value?
I have to say, I've heard of holding the mirror up so many times. I mean, I wouldn't be in coaching world if I'd not heard of holding the mirror, but I've never heard of holding a grotesque mirror. Jules, have you made this up, or is this an actual thing? The grotesque. I wouldn't like somebody to say, Joe, here's a mirror. Oh, by the way, it's grotesque. Go and look in it. That would make me go, what? What am I going to look back at? Wait, this sounds ugly at the it's bad enough looking in a normal mirror for me, never mind a grotesque one.
Billy Bean. No, I think this is about sometimes you know what you're going to see. And to your silly point about they look tired, you're going to have bags under the eyes. Well, then face into it, look at the bags, understand why they're there. I think all of us will have come out of the pandemic with a few bags under our eyes as a metaphor. And I think this is a great chance, and we call it a grotesque mirror. This is a Simon Sinek reference, but it's when you have the courage and bravery to then look at the bits that are, most baggy,
really
so to speak. And there are lots of those creeping up now. We're seeing a huge problem with attrition, huge problem with attrition, not us as an organisation, but just holistically. You're seeing buoyancy where people are moving for $3,000 more, $4,000 more, whatever it is, as a proportion of their total worth. It's really negligible. But people are believing this is life-changing because the cost of living has gone up. So I think value holistically is not just about price, and that comes down to just salary. We need to start being more communicative about all the things that we can offer people, whether that's well-being opportunities, health benefits, all sorts of safety or flexibility or agility in your contracts, for example. Really restating, telling them you've told them and telling them again what it is that you think is their worth.
Because surely that also has a lot of value and worth. This is two-way thing. This is absolutely, and I'm definitely in the kind of conversation camp about how can we make our cultures better, but when we do that, it's got to come back, hasn't it? It's got to be a two-way thing. This is where you have the conversations, you improve the value, the worth, and then you get back that conversation that says, you got me for life now, just based on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not just loyalty. So you can incite change in an organization that potentially gives people more loyalty and retention, and that hits the attrition piece. But I think it's deeper and bigger than that. If somebody feels incredibly valued and they say, you've got me for life, they're the kind of people that have an external guise on their industry. They're the people that sit at home and want to read more about the industry they're in or understand their customers. They want to they're so much more invested. And I know that's a hard thing to evaluate or measure, but an example we've got a gentleman who works in our organisation who has had a very creative and slightly bizarre background, nothing to do with food science whatsoever, and we've given him an opportunity to do something which helps him learn, and then he's decided to learn more bits and bobs in his free time.
Brilliant.
To the point now where we can't be without him and he can't be without us. It's Super. This beautiful thing that his worth and his value is about growing him as a person. He wants to be brilliant at one thing for his children, and we've talked very intimately about that. I think he's a remarkable example of someone who it's not about how much you pay somebody. I fully appreciate we all have to live, but he said very early doors, if you keep growing me, I'll keep growing you, which is just wonderful.
Because that's fabulous, isn't it? Wow. Jules, we have talked about so much in this short conversation. I'm loving the concept of value and the fact that actually this came to you from one of your team in the organisation going, look, I need to talk about this, but they felt safe enough to do that. And you've been going out there having intimacy chats and talking and finding out what people value, what does it mean to them, and how can you as an organisation do something about that. And coaching being, for you, building a coaching culture, let's have these conversations. Let's open up the art of the open conversation again and the open questions, and just start listening again, because I know what you're saying about the pandemic. People have reevaluated and then we've come back into something that feels different, and people are getting used to hybrid working or not. It's now because it is working. It's just working now, isn't it? It's the new way. So it is working. It's just working. And I think it's working for some and not for others. I did a post the other day on LinkedIn, like, have we lost the art of some level of manners? Video calls, people forget to come on them. Whereas if you went face to face with your little briefcase, that would never have happened. You'd have had a very different experience. So actually, there's definitely a shift in the way things are happening. And to me, there's pros and cons, and actually, I think you're right. If we get more under the skin of what people are valuing now, we'll all move together forward and get in the right systems and processes and conversations around the organisation and through the leadership team and through managers and teams. We'll all move forward together, but it's not always going to be easy. This is a time thing, and the world around us is going a bit crazy at the moment. It's actually how can we navigate together through it? And that is through people like yourself driving this. Is there anything else you'd want to, and who? Me? And Coaching Culture, Jo's podcast and the magazine and the team behind us. We're all beating on the soapbox drum of how it matters, because it so does, and we're so passionate about it.
Yeah.
And it, you know, you've probably seen that we've been splashing pictures about what we've got in our room next door on the Make Work Better, and it's what we're here for, and we love it. Is there anything else you want to share today, Jules? You know, any extra nuggets in your toolkit to get out there today while we're talking? Because we have covered a lot. Is there anything more that you'd want to say or share?
I would just finish with something that I think we've talked about in many dialogues, whether it's been at the brilliant conferences that you have, or whether it's been through podcasts with your existing guests or myself. I talk a lot about legacy, because I'm in a place where I have 2 little girls who I absolutely want to make sure whenever I've been in an organisation, I leave it in a great place for one day, potentially them. I would invite anybody just finishing this podcast off to think about their value, whether you're in a car journey this evening or whatever it may be. It's bright in the morning and you're going for a run and you're listening to this. Think about your value, and then think about their value, the next generation, whoever that may be to you, and think about the connection between the two, because we have an opportunity to shape it for the future. And what do we want?
Thank you, Jules. That was absolutely brilliant. And yes, I know we talk about this at our conference, because you put your pictures there of Millie, and you know, it's everything you stand for, isn't it? About how can we future-proof our organisation today? How can we make this a brighter world for our children? And that is it resonates every time. And fundamentally, that's why a lot of people get out of bed in the morning, to make that difference. And let's make it not just for today, for the future. Thank you, Jules. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for listening to this Coaching Culture podcast. Please do tune in for more fabulous guests just like Jules, more inspiration and more practical guidance on how you can make a difference out there in the world of your organisation. Thank you.